the internal collision. Collisions are preventable. Avoid them all. A message from the Road Safety Unit in the Ministry of Transport and Mining.
Jamaica, home of the resilient, passionate and hard-working. A people and a nation who have achieved and defied all odds, working to keep their economy growing, their country thriving, from investments made in innovative opportunities and exports demanded globally. We have a vision, now within our grasp, where Jamaica becomes the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. We will not let go of this vision. We will grow. We will overcome these challenging times and look to the future with hope and positivity. These are special times. The world as we know it has changed, but home will always be in our hearts. And in Jamaica, you can always find a home. Think you know Jamaica? Look again. You will be surprised.
On election day, all electors must wear a mask and have their hands sanitized. Electors must observe 6 feet physical distancing and remove your mask when instructed by the presiding officer so you may be identified. You will be issued a ballot along with a pencil and directed to the voting booth. Hand your ballot to the presiding officer and place your pencil in the box for used pencils. Sanitize your hand before dipping your finger in the electoral ink. This is a message from the Electoral Commission of Jamaica.
Brought to you by the Jamaica Debates Commission in association with Proven, Flow, Scotiabank, National Democratic Institute, Digicel, NCB, Panjam, UWI, JN Group, and Victoria Mutual Group. Tonight we focus on leadership. Our moderator is Dervin Malcolm.
Good evening. Welcome to the final in a series of 3 political debates live from the studios of CPTC, organized by the Jamaica Debates Commission, a partnership of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce and Media Association Jamaica. The debates are intended to assist in identifying, clarifying, and understanding the issues being presented in this general election campaign. This evening, we're pleased to welcome viewers from 18 stations around the Caribbean, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. We also have people watching via Zoom. This evening's debate focuses on leadership. And now, joining us on the debate stage, the President of the People's National Party, PNP, Dr. Peter Phillips. And the leader of the Jamaica Labour Party, JLP, Mr. Andrew Holness. Members of the panel of questioners are from the RGR Gleaner Communications Group, Dion Jackson Miller. And from Sportsmax Scene TV, President of the Press Association of Jamaica, George Davis. Taking and presenting questions from the public is our social media editor, Marjorie Gordon of Nationwide News Network. And I'm your moderator, Dervan Malcolm. The guidelines for tonight's debate have been previously agreed and are posted on the Debate Commission's website at jamaicadebatescommission.org. The guidelines include questions being no longer than 30 seconds, each debater having a maximum of 90 seconds to answer the question, each debater being allowed a maximum of 45 seconds to rebut the answer given by the other debater. The moderator having the latitude to raise follow-up questions for clarification only. Questioners being allowed a follow-up question to their primary question and on only 2 occasions during the entire debate will they have to ask those follow-up questions. Now, follow-up questions will be permitted at the discretion of the moderator. Where a follow-up question is asked, the debater shall have 30 seconds to provide the answer. Where a follow-up question is asked, it shall not interrupt the sequence of questions posed to the respective debaters. The questions posed in tonight's debate are created solely by the panel of journalists and are not influenced by the Jamaica Debates Commission in any way. Based on a coin toss, Dr. Peter Phillips of the PNP will deliver his opening statement first, while at the end of the debate, Mr. Andrew Holness of the JLP will present his closing statement last. And now, the 2-minute opening statement from Dr. Peter Phillips of the PNP.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Jamaicans here at home and overseas. On September 3rd, the Jamaican people have an important choice to make. We can either continue with economic stagnation, or we can approach with major crime and murder statistics, with a deepening digital divide, or we can choose a different future. We can choose a future of opportunity, of better education for all our people, a future of relief from the COVID pressures, and we can proceed in a way that offers opportunity to all our people. If we are to choose that future, we need to do it together. And when we act together, we can build a very different set of opportunities for our people. So on September 3rd, I am urging you all to vote for the People's National Party.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. And now, the 2-minute opening statement from Mr. Andrew Holness of the JLP.
Thank you, Dervan. Good evening, Jamaicans at home and in the diaspora. Before I begin, allow me to say happy birthday to my mom. Love you, Mom. Stay safe. It is a distinct pleasure for me to serve as your Prime Minister. I have never taken for granted the trust and the confidence you have invested in me. I will never forget Mas Tom, an elderly gentleman leaving the polling station on election day and waving his ink-stained hands at me, saying, "Andrew, do the right thing." Today, I am very proud to report to this country that we have been doing the right thing by Jamaica. We have been building roads and bridges like no other government has. We have been increasing access to water. In our 4.5 years, 22,000 Jamaicans have had the chance not to rent, but to own their own homes. We have created over 100,000 jobs. Poverty is at its lowest in 10 years. We have increased the school feeding program from 3 days to 5 days. We have made massive investments in security to equip our security forces and increase their presence in your community. But the greatest achievement, I believe, is that in 3 of our 5 budgets, we have either have had no new taxes, or we have given back taxes that Dr. Peter Papa Tax Phillips had placed in you. On our 5 budgets, when you take them cumulatively, we have net given back taxes. That has never happened in the history of Jamaica. We have been good stewards of your affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. Our first question tonight comes from Dion Jackson Miller from the RGR Gleaner Communications Group, and it will be directed to Dr. Phillips.
Dr. Phillips, in a statement on July 23rd, you spoke of states of emergency as involving, quote, prolonged wholesale infringement of the rights of Jamaicans, end quote. Now, you did vote to end an SOE back in December 2018, but every other time you voted with the government to extend them. How does Jamaica trust you with leadership when your own voting record on a matter of fundamental rights accords with the popular choice rather than the principle that you yourself say you espouse?
There are 2 principles that were at stake. One is the obvious need to have a response to the problem of mounting crime. The government refused to provide any other alternative. We continue to make our case to them while at the same time advocating a different approach to the whole question of crime control and murder control. And so we believe that there is a way other than a way relying on the states of emergency to deal with hotspot policing, intelligence-led policing, and one which recognizes the rights of citizens. It's a difficult choice, but we ended up making the right one.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Mr. Holness, your rebuttal.
Look, let's just face the facts. The truth is that the people called for the states of public emergency. I remember very well the first time that the PNP voted to end the states of public emergency in St. James. It was grief and panic. The truth is that they very well know that the SOEs have been very effective in controlling the murder and crime pandemic. It has flattened the murder curve in Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. And now George Davis will pose a question to Mr. Andrew Holness.
Mr. Holness, in the Education Ministry's 2019 high school rankings, the percentage of schools with students passing at least 5 C6 subjects ranged from 100% at Campion to 0.8% for the lowest ranked school. Of the 161 schools listed, 91 had less than 20% passes. And while the top 10 averaged over 90% passes, the bottom 10 averaged under 2% passes. How then do you propose to create a more equitable education system?
Thanks for that question, George. The first thing that we need to ensure is that all children going into primary school get into primary school at the same level. So you have to level the playing field starting at the early childhood level. And so we know what to do in terms of the investment in education, and that is well underway. The second thing that you have to do is ensure that students at the primary level develop the critical skills of literacy, numeracy, and in today's world, digital numeracy, so that they are able to access the curriculum at the secondary level, which is why my government emphasized literacy and numeracy at the grade 4 level. We made it a national priority. We moved the literacy rate at grade 4 from 50%, which we took it, to in the region of between 85 and 90%. Since then, things have floundered, but the government of the Jamaica Labour Party is now putting in place a commission to review our entire education system to ensure that our children get equal access to good education at all levels of the education system, to enable them to not just regurgitate, but to enable them to think critically and be creative and productive citizens.
Dr. Peter Phillips, your rebuttal.
What is clear is that after 4.5 years, the government has still failed to do the simplest thing, which is to utilize up-to-date modern technologies in the school system. The tablets in schools have not been delivered. There is still too many schools who do not have access to internet services. Overall, the government has failed to meet the challenge to deliver better educational opportunity in the schools. And I think they must be held to account for that. Now, after 4.5 years, they are beginning to look at a commission to deal with education. Not good enough.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Marjorie Gordon of Nationwide News Network has been working the social media beat, and she has a question right now.
Thanks, Dervan. Now, on social media, Omar Yard wants to know, if you become the next Prime Minister, will you have fixed election dates and term limits?
And that question is to you, Dr. Phillips.
The country needs to explore this question of fixed election dates. We are prepared to move down that track and develop the legislation. I would point out that this was a commitment that the current government gave at the before this current term. Nothing has been done in that regard, as they have failed to act also on the question of impeachment or the provision of job descriptions for ministers. The failure to provide job descriptions for ministers has resulted in the worst wave of corrupt behavior and thievery in government that this country has seen in its entire post-independence history.
Mr. Holness, you have an opportunity to respond to that question as well.
Fixed election dates remain an aspiration of this government. So too are our commitments regarding the development and the execution of a grand referendum. As it relates to issues such as job descriptions, you know, not many persons would know this, but our cabinet at each retreat requires each minister to develop a work plan, which I personally review, monitor, and evaluate. And in addition to that, you may not know, but we have put in place a training system where our ministers participate in training in public affairs management and training in good governance. So we have done far more than a job description on a piece of paper. We have put that into action, and you have seen the results. I stand here on a platform of performance, of delivery. He has been saying all kinds of things about the government, but he cannot say that this government has not delivered, even on things which they started and did not complete.
Thank you, gentlemen. And we now take our first break in this national leadership debate. Please stay with us.
The general election debates are presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission in association with Proven, Flow, Scotiabank, National Democratic Institute, Digicel, NCB, Panjam, UWI, JN Group, and Victoria Mutual Group. Watch, listen, decide, vote.
Elections in Jamaica are now monitored under the campaign financing legislation. Therefore, I implore all candidates, political parties and contributors to adhere to the requirements.
Candidates in an election may spend up to $15 million and registered political parties up to $630 million. Candidates, political parties and contributors who fail to disclose are guilty of an offense and liable to charges and/or a term of imprisonment.
The transparency and effectiveness of our democratic process requires you to be informed and involved.
A message from the Electoral Commission of Jamaica.
The point of wearing a mask is to prevent the spread of air droplets from persons who may or may not be infected. When wearing a mask, please ensure that the mask goes above the nose and below the chin. This might be a bit uncomfortable, but it's for your own safety. The position of the mask is very important. It should not be worn on your forehead, under your chin, or on your neck. Please do not remove the mask when speaking. This actually causes more droplets to be released into the atmosphere. Trust me, if you have on a mask, we will still hear you. When you're removing a mask, try not to touch the front of the mask. If you do, remember to wash your hands or use hand sanitizer. Please throw away the mask appropriately. Remember, partial protection is better than no protection.
Jamaica, home of the resilient, passionate and hard-working. A people and a nation who have achieved and defied all odds, working to keep their economy growing, their country thriving, from investments made in innovative opportunities and exports demanded globally. We have a vision, now within our grasp, where Jamaica becomes the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. We will not let go of this vision. We will grow. We will overcome these challenging times and look to the future with hope and positivity. These are special times, The world as we know it has changed, but home will always be in our hearts. And in Jamaica, you can always find a home. Think you know Jamaica? Look again. You will be surprised.
Wagwan people, Dutty Berry here. Now, if you have not been living under a pop-down welcome home mat, then you would know that it is election season. Now, you see, some people, them like them seasoning like the color of thyme, and others like it the color of turmeric. To each his own. But the important thing is that you actively participate in the process. Get to know your MPs and know the shreds on the policies, and then you just do the do and put the X where you see fit on election day. But you see, whichever season that you prefer, you just have to make sure that your voice counts.
This is our home, Jamaica, and tourism is the lifeblood of our country. Let's all feel good again. Whether with family or friends, we want you to enjoy your staycation.
We have to ensure that they are comfortable, they feel well protected.
New standards are in place to ensure your safety. We are here to serve you better, so you can have the best experience. Come out and rediscover Jamaica.
We are ready.
We are ready.
We are ready.
Rediscover Jamaica.
Heartbeat of the world.
Hello? 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 Yeah, you. Hold on, and a pandemic winner. You're now wearing a mask, you're now washing your hand, and you now keep the required 6 feet distancing from other people. And what could I really cause you? You need to stop it. That no mask, no wash, and no distance something there, nah keep. You know what keep? COVID-19. Yeah, it not gone nowhere. COVID-19, they are same way. So here what you are going to do for all of we. Wear your mask, wash or sanitize your hands pan a regular, and yeah, keep your distance, please. And thanks.
What can a little germs do?
Pink eye running belly, even flu. Germs can make them happen to you.
Put germs on our manners with these. Cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze. Always wash your hand with water and soap. Keep dirty hands from your eyes.
Scotiabank, National Democratic Institute, Digicel, NCB, Panjam, UWI, JN Group, and Victoria Mutual Group. Watch, listen, decide, vote.
Welcome back to the final in a series of 3 political debates being facilitated by the Jamaica Debates Commission, a partnership of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce and Media Association, Jamaica. If you're just joining us, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll begin this segment with Dion Jackson Miller of the RGR Gleaner Communications Group directing her question to Mr. Andrew Holness of the Jamaica Labour Party.
Mr. Holness, on August 9, the Ministry of Health announced another COVID death and 20 new cases. August 10, 8 new cases. August 11, 16 new cases. That's the day you announced the election. You ignored calls not to campaign. We saw photos of you campaigning in Trelawney and Mandeville and Eastern St. Andrew with crowds around your vehicle, and it wasn't until we saw the numbers spiking alarmingly that you finally suspended campaigning. Mr. Holness, do you deserve to be Prime Minister again, given that at such a critical time for the country, you chose to prioritize politics over public health?
We would never do anything to place the lives of the Jamaican people at risk. The pandemic will only end when there is a safe and widely distributed vaccine. This may be between 1.5 years to 2 years, according to some experts. This would be well outside of the constitutional limits to call an election. Jamaica is still considered to be one of the countries that has managed the pandemic extremely well. And in fact, we have one of the lowest mortality rates worldwide per capita. Let me take this opportunity to offer my deepest condolences to the families of those who have lost someone to this terrible disease. We should note, however, that the definition of a pandemic is that there will be spikes. Indeed, even the countries that have sought to have strict lockdowns for a very long time, for example, New Zealand, they have had a spike. Jamaica is not the only country to have decided to go ahead with an election. And there's very good reason why governments do this. The truth is that what we have learned for the last 4 or 5 months in managing the pandemic is that we must go on with our society. We must go on with our economy. We must go on with going back to school. We must go on with going to the market. We must move ahead with our society.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holness. Dr. Phillips, your rebuttal.
I think the most disturbing thing about the recent handling of the spike in cases is the disregard that has been given to the scientific advice of the medical personnel. In the period of the Emancipendence celebrations, the recommendation was made that there should be a tightening of the arrangements, the curfew arrangements and the other arrangements. That was ignored. The consequence has been devastating on the people of Jamaica. Yes, there will be a pandemic, but there's no need to ignore proper advice. There's no need to ignore common sense, and there is every need to protect the people of the country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phillips. Dion Jackson Miller has a follow-up question for Mr. Andrew Holness.
Not talking about calling the election, Mr. Holness, don't you think that campaigning in the way you did facilitated the spread of the virus?
Absolutely not. Indeed, what I did as Prime Minister, I acquired over 500,000 masks, and I personally distributed over 80,000 masks. Wherever I went, I made sure to play a public service announcement giving directions to persons how they should operate and how they should behave. Listen, Dion, the truth is, even points being made regarding disregarding the scientific advice. We are now in the phase of the pandemic where the society has to learn to live with the disease.
Thank you.
The government has put in place all the measures necessary to ensure that it is safe for the people of Jamaica to campaign and safe to vote and safe to go out and work and do business.
George Davis, your question to Dr. Peter Phillips.
Dr. Phillips, a few months ago, the nation prayed as you took time off to deal with cancer. As you continue your treatment and recovery, how should Jamaicans reconcile the status of your health when considering whether to vote PNP so you can be Prime Minister for the next 5 years?
Well, the first point I would make is that my treatment is over. I am cancer-free, and I thank God for that opportunity. At the present time, I think we have to recognize that what I am called upon to do is to operate with the best of my ability, to give of myself, as I have done at every stage in my public service career. I come here with clean hands. In an earlier phase, I had the opportunity as a very young man to coordinate the construction of 10,000 houses in Portmore. I had opportunities subsequently to establish the JUTC, to establish the route taxi system. I have subsequently had opportunity as a more mature person to rescue Jamaica's economy from the chaos in which it was left by the then JLP administration in the period 2007 to 2011. Now I am prepared to give service again as long as the Almighty permits it and my health enables it. And as of now, my health is in perfect condition.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Your rebuttal, Mr. Holness.
Well, I'm happy to hear that the leader of the opposition is cancer-free. The truth is as well, you know, my hands are clean. I have worked hard. I have presided over the construction of 22,000 housing solutions and more. You know, I've had the opportunity to be Minister of Education, to really make profound and fundamental changes in education. As Prime Minister, I'm also a minister, and I have presided over the construction of more roads in Jamaica than any other government in, you know, the recent history of Jamaica, including completing projects that started under his administration, which they didn't complete.
Thank you.
So I can't see why
Thank you,
he
Mr.
would want
Holness.
now to come
Marjorie,
and make a case.
Marjorie Gordon is on the social media beat, and she has another question.
Thanks, Durvan. On Twitter, they're asking, if you form the next government, what concrete steps will you take to protect the watershed areas, especially since drought conditions are exacerbated every year?
Mr. Holness.
Thank you for that question. We are the party that have taken the greatest steps to protect our environment, including our watershed. And the one that I want to point out is what we have done in protecting the biggest watershed in Jamaica, which is the Cockpit Country. We are the political party that took this matter by the scruff of the neck and made it possible. We got it done. For decades that dithered under previous administrations. We got it done. And we will continue working with our international partners. I personally have taken a lead role in climate change matters, and we have been receiving great support from our international partners through climate change funds and other funds to protect our watersheds and to create a government that is responsive and resilient as it relates to the environment and natural disasters.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. You also get an opportunity to respond to that social media question, Dr. Phillips.
I think Jamaica owes a debt of gratitude to former Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller for having established for the first time ever a ministry with responsibility for climate change. This is one of the big challenges of our present period, and we ought not to become confused. We must be definitive about not permitting mining in the Cockpit Country, for example. We need to act decisively to protect the other areas of watershed and to ensure climate resilience along our coastlines, our waterways, our rivers. This is the most important challenge of now, and we need to mobilize the entire country to deal with it.
Dion Jackson Miller will now direct her next question to Dr. Peter Phillips.
Dr. Phillips, frankly, it's been wonderful seeing two brilliant women leading the government and opposition sides in the Senate. But drill down deeper, and you said there are only 2 of 8 opposition senators that are women. That's 25%. 4 of 13 government senators that are women. That's 30%. Politicians talk a good game on gender equality, but here, when it's completely within their control, they don't deliver. Win or lose, Dr. Phillips, would you commit to nominate a slate of at least 50% women to the Senate?
We have said that we believe that there needs to be at least 50% representation, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. But I think we also need to understand that there are many factors that impede women's participation. The support for child care, for example, in the House and Senate, and generally is one such factor. The fact that women carry a greater share of household work is also another factor. So actually getting the right level of representation is going to take more than just a commitment. We're going to have to deal with all of these other factors that really impede women's full participation. We are committed to dealing with those factors in the People's National Party.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Holness.
I think it's a simple thing that you can do, which is to ensure that in your recruitment at least, you have more women. We have done that in the Jamaica Labour Party. We have been deliberate in going out and seeking to recruit women. And now we have more female candidates representing the party than ever before.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. Dion Jackson Miller has a follow-up question for Dr. Phillips.
Yes, Dr. Phillips. respectfully just asking for a yes or no. We have an entire country of wonderful, capable, professional women. You would only need to find 4 if you're in opposition, or 6 or 7 if you're in government. Would you commit to a slate of at least 50% that you nominate entirely within your control, sir?
I thought I said so. It is a yes.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. George Davis, your question now for Mr. Andrew Holness.
Mr. Holness, given the different ways in which you've dealt with ministers embroiled in scandal, Roel Reed sacked, Dr. Wheatley resigned, Daryl Vaz at OPM, J.C. Hutchinson at OPM, could you tell Jamaica the things a minister has to be involved in to be summarily removed from cabinet?
The discretion to remove a minister from cabinet is entirely in the hands of the Prime Minister. And indeed, that would range from non-performance, dereliction of duties, lack of accountability, lack of responsiveness, and breaking with policy, breaking cabinet, the secrecy of cabinet. There are a host of things as it relates to impropriety, malfeasance, misfeasance, or corruption. Firstly, I have to be satisfied that there is enough, even without an independent authority investigating and pronouncing. I would have to satisfy myself that there is enough. Once I'm satisfied, I will act. Further action sometimes require that I await the pronouncement of independent bodies that are authorized to make definitive statements on corruption. But generally, the public would see and would know that I have acted proportionately and appropriately to address issues of impropriety, issues of lack of accountability, issues of corruption.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. Dr. Phillips, your rebuttal.
For 8 months after the issue of Petrojam came up, the Prime Minister failed to act until Mr. Wheatley removed himself from the cabinet by resignation. There was no action taken against Roel Reed until we in the People's National Party raised the question. The following day, Reed was removed from the cabinet. Now there are a number of ministers who have been found wanting, and they seem to have become part of a holding cell at Jamaica House. It reflects a lack of commitment to the principles of anti-corruption, and it reflects a failure to be bold and decisive in showing leadership to the country.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Marjorie Gordon of Nationwide News Network has been combing through the throngs of messages on social media, and she has another question.
Yes, Durvan. Now, Rupert Francis, he wants to know, how do you plan to reduce Jamaica's demand on importation and focus more on local production?
And that first goes to Dr. Phillips. You know, one of the striking things about the present administration is that despite the previous administration having reduced $300 million of the country's food bill, it has risen again to in excess of 1.1 billion US dollars or thereabouts. We believe that an important part of the reduction of our import bill centers upon agricultural transformation. And we are committed to doing this by ensuring, first of all, that our farmers, especially our small farmers, get better advice from RADA, that they are given titles for the land, which enables them to become mainstream participants in the financial sector, and that they are also assisted with marketing, both in CARICOM and internationally. We think that there is tremendous scope for enhancing our export capability, beginning with agriculture, but including other areas such as our creative sectors, for example, and in the digital economy. Jamaica can do better. We will do better under PNP administration.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phillips. Mr. Holness, your opportunity to respond to the question.
Quickly, when I listened to Dr. Phillips speak, it's as if he just came to the stage. Dr. Phillips has been there for more than 2 decades. And so these problems have existed for a very long time, and they have done nothing. The truth is that the Jamaica Labour Party government, in its first year, created MICAF, the Ministry of Investment, Commerce, Agriculture, and Fisheries. Why? Because we recognize that agriculture requires investment and technology to transform it. What has happened since? We have managed to attract the interest of businessmen into agriculture that are making massive investments. Case in point, Innswood, where over 1,000 acres have been put into production in potatoes and other things, which will be effectively reducing our import bill. We will replicate this 100 times over, but not just for the big investor. These projects also include the small farmers working in conjunction with big capital to deliver significant output. They talk, we get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. Please stay where you are. The national leadership debate returns in just a moment.
The general election debates are presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission in association with Proven, Flow, Scotiabank, National Democratic Institute, Digicel, NCB, Panjam, UWI, JN Group, and Victoria Mutual Group. Watch, listen, decide, vote.
On election day, all electors must wear a mask and have their hands sanitized. Electors must observe 6 feet physical distancing and remove your mask when instructed by the presiding officer so you may be identified. You will be issued a ballot along with a pencil and directed to the voting booth. Hand your ballot to the presiding officer and place your pencil in the box for used pencils. Sanitize your hand before dipping your finger in the electoral ink. This is a message from the Electoral Commission of Jamaica.
Young people may have different interests from those of older voters, and those interests should be represented. Voting will affect the nature of representation and ultimately the content of public policy. So if you don't vote, you and your distinct interests are more likely to be ignored or neglected by policymakers. Make your voice count.
The next person in line, your friend at school or your co-worker, may have COVID-19 and not know because they have no symptoms. You, on the other hand, could be hospitalized for 2 months or more if you become infected. Is it worth it? Stay socially connected, but keep the physical distance. Stay 6 feet away and avoid a hospital stay. COVID-19 is not over. Protect yourself while protecting others. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Take it down. Reggae music is the heartbeat of the country.
Low and stable inflation
is the heartbeat of the economy.
Beneficiaries. The PATH payment cycle begins on August 24, and post offices and payment agencies will deliver payments based on last names up to September 11. Check the Friday Star to find out when and where you should collect. If you miss your date, you can collect on September 14 or 15. Take a government ID and don't forget your mask. For more information, call PATH at 876-922-8007 or visit the Ministry's website and Facebook page. PATH, advancing your family, developing Jamaica. A message from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security.
This is what you've been waiting for. A chance to change your point of view and take the break you deserve at Jamaica's resorts and attractions. When you can open your door to the seaside instead of just outside. Where you can change your mask and take a plunge.
Sunshine smiling warm up inside your heart. Feeling of pure love. Oh, Jamaican heart.
your travel agent today to book your staycation. RediscoverJamaica.com.
Young people who are involved in the electoral process affirm their support for democracy, as well as acquire a stake in the system and an appreciation that they too can affect politics and policy. Indeed, political integration of youth may promote public order and democratic stability as long as young people are given a real voice. Their vote is seen as meaningful and influential, and the system is responsive to their input. Make your voice count.
This is a message from the Early Childhood Commission. Do you have a child between 0 to 2 years of age? If yes, you need to download the ECC's First 1000 Days app. It allows you to receive parenting tips, track developmental milestones, learn about the Brain Builder concept, receive relevant articles and research, plus interactive content. The First 1000 Days app, now available for download on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with the cold or flu-like symptoms. If you think you've been exposed to COVID-19, stay home. Self-isolate immediately and call 888-1-LOVE. That's 888-663-5683. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
The general election debates are presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission in association with Proven, Flow, Scotiabank, National Democratic Institute, Digicel, NCB, Panjam, UWI, JN Group, and Victoria Mutual Group. Watch, listen, decide, vote.
Welcome back to the final in a series of 3 political debates being facilitated by the Jamaica Debates Commission. If you're just joining us, we're glad to have you. In this segment, Dion Jackson Miller of the RGR Gleaner Communications Group will direct her next question to Mr. Andrew Holness.
Mr. Holness, you asked senators to sign undated resignation letters. The court ruled that unconstitutional. You pushed through NIDS despite concerns by civil society. The court ruled it unconstitutional. You initially ignored objections to your appointment of a temporary Chief Justice, causing nearly 100 judges to sign an unprecedented protest statement. Given these attitudes and actions, how can Jamaicans trust you to implement policy and law in accordance with our supreme law, the Constitution?
I think once the courts have ruled on a matter, there is no question about my respect and compliance for the rules of the court. I've been involved in several court cases, in fact, in groundbreaking cases, including the first case on the voiding of elections. The facts are that many of these issues were not clarified in law, and these cases have clarified them in law. And I respect our courts and follow their rules with great respect and consistency.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. Your rebuttal, Dr. Phillips.
The sad truth is that in all of this, particularly in the NIDS matter and in the matter of the appointment of the Chief Justice, it could have been avoided. We pleaded in the Parliament at every stage with the government and the Prime Minister to say simply, why don't you put this to a joint select committee so that it can be discussed in the way that Parliament was intended to discuss far-reaching and controversial legislation. It is reflective of a pattern of arrogance in the conduct of the government that they refused at every point to just heed common sense and goodwill.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. George Davis, your question for Dr. Phillips.
Dr. Phillips, on each occasion the Holness administration announced a state of emergency in a location, they stated explicitly they were doing so on the advice of the police and the military. Since you have said repeatedly, SOEs are not the answer, will you reject any recommendation to declare an SOE in any area if you form the next government?
We can never say that you will never have an SOE anywhere, but I think it needs to be made very plain that the security forces are subject to civilian direction, and therefore it is going to be the judgment of the administration as to whether constitutional rights are to be infringed upon and what circumstances would require this. It cannot be any other way.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Your rebuttal, Mr. Holness.
You know, the discussion regarding rights must always also focus on the rights of the many families that have lost loved ones to criminals. It must focus on the rights of people who are locked in their communities, cowering in fear because of criminals. The state must act, and it must act decisively, protecting the rights of all its citizens. This government has done so. We have made massive investments in security, where our security architecture was disinvested for many years. And we have asked our police and military to do a job for which they were ill-equipped and ill-resourced. We have now found a very good strategic approach.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. George Davis has a follow-up question for Dr. Peter Phillips.
Yes, Dr. Phillips, based on what you said in your answer, the leadership of the JCF and JDF and the recommendations of SOEs to the government, and since SOEs are not your preferred prescription, will you then seek to replace those leaders upon taking office and have people more aligned with how you'd want certain recommendations made?
No, the question of replacing individuals is not that of any particular government. The Police Service Commission has the responsibility for the appointment of a police commissioner. The Defense Board has responsibilities in respect of a Chief of Defense Staff. These positions are not to be politicized and acted upon whimsically, but I think we have to make it absolutely clear that they are subject to political direction, civilian direction.
Thank you. We now have another social media question. Marjorie Gordon of Nationwide News Network. Marjorie?
Joel on Instagram wants to know, Durvan, what two major digital reforms do you hope to accomplish if you become Prime Minister?
Mr. Holness, you get the first opportunity to respond to the question.
I'm glad that question was asked. The leader of the opposition mentioned the government's eagerness to get the NIDS bill passed. And I've seen where the opposition has used its role and function in Parliament to prevent important pieces of legislation from coming to fruition. The NIDS is the foundation of us building a digital society. They stopped it. Another critical part of the development of a digital society is to ensure that our young people are properly trained to articulate and participate in the work opportunities that will come from the fourth industrial revolution. We plan to develop and build 6 STEM schools which will focus not just on science and engineering and mathematics, but on coding, which is now a new language. It has always been, but we have not embraced coding as a language. We will build a tech city in Portmore where there is tremendous skills, and we will from that move that tech city into parishes of St. James and into St. Mary and into St. Elizabeth. We will get the young people of this country in tune with the fourth industrial revolution so that we will not just be mere consumers of technology, but creators of technology.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holness. And now, Dr. Phillips, your opportunity to respond.
Let me point out once again that the People's National Party did nothing to stop NIDS. It was the courts of Jamaica. The Prime Minister's approach to this matter reflects an arrogance and disregard of the role of the courts, which is quite frankly unbecoming of anyone. Now let me say this. Simply put, there are many things that we should do. We should be digitizing all our school records. We should be digitizing all our hospital records in the country. We should be digitizing all our public records, our titles office, and all of these other things. That can be done, and it can be done quickly, and it is something we are committed to. It will enhance the efficiency of the overall administration of the country.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. And Dion Jackson Miller also has a question for you.
Dr. Phillips, Port Antonio, February 19, 2016. You were then finance minister and you called the JLP's 1.5 tax plan a, quote, desperate attempt of people who want power, end quote. Now, you're the one in opposition with a manifesto full of promises. Given that many people left the finance debate still confused about this, can you explain for us in very specific language how the PNP would fund its giveaways in a post-COVID economy?
I think it is very clear, and we make no apology for the fact that in the face of the COVID pandemic and the economic impact it is having, a devastating impact on the lives of so many families, so many people in the informal economy, it is absolutely important that the government of the country throws a lifeline to these people. And so we have no apology at all about, in fact, putting a people agenda at the center. It is also the case, as has been recognized by the entire Parliament, that in the face of the economic fallout from the pandemic, we are going to have to loosen some of the fiscal rules. It is the loosening of the fiscal rules and the introduction of some degree of deficit financing that will enable a lot of this to be done, as well as the reprioritizing of some expenditure. When we give support to big business operations, everybody thinks it is reasonable. We think that the ordinary Jamaican people need to get support to survive COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Your rebuttal, Mr. Holness.
You know, Durvan, Master Tom called me before I came to debate, and he said he was reading Peter Papatax Phillips' manifesto. And in that manifesto, he was caught by the promise of $48,000 per year per household. And he said, let me check that. And that worked out to about 200 billion Jamaican dollars. Master Arm said to me, tell Papatax Phillips that me may poor, but me no fool.
That's not $200 million.
Thank you, Mr. Holness.
Not true.
George Davis of Sportsmax Scene TV has another question for Mr. Holness.
Mr. Holness, in your 2016 manifesto, you sketched a 10-point plan for effective crime management and security to, in your words, make Jamaica a safer, more peaceful and more prosperous society. Despite listing 47 points of achievements in this manifesto, there is nothing, no mention of anything that has been achieved to make citizens feel safer. Is this tacit acknowledgement of your party's failure in this regard?
Of course not. Thank you for the opportunity to bring up all our successes. You know, there's been no other government that has repaired and built new police stations like this government. There's no other government that has provided mobility, and more than that, equipped our fleet with tracking. There has been no other government that has equipped the JDF with the capabilities to manage our domain, not just our land domain, but our exclusive economic zone at sea, which is very important for creating the blue economy. There has never been a government that has increased the manpower, the size and capability of both security forces to be able to increase presence in your community. You just need to ask the people of Mount Salem, the people of Greenwich Farm, the people in Augustown, how that expenditure of security and increased presence, which the opposition every time in Parliament calls for, we have done it and we have delivered. We know that crime is not a flip of the switch, but we have made the investments necessary to see to the long-term and sustainable reduction in crime and make Jamaica a peaceful society.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holness. Your rebuttal, Dr. Phillips?
I think we need to recognize quite fundamentally that the murder rate is higher over the 4.5 years of the current JLP administration than it has been in the previous 4.5 years of the People's National Party administration. The strategy that they have been pursuing has not worked. And beyond that, they failed to try to grapple with the need to build a national consensus around this matter. We begin with mobilizing the people to accomplish great things, and crime control is one.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Marjorie Gordon has been sifting through the teeming and rising numbers of responses on social media. What question do you have for us right now, Marjorie Gordon?
Well, Damarni on Facebook, he wants to know, what are your plans to reduce brain drain or retain skilled and qualified Jamaicans in the country?
Dr. Phillips, you get the first opportunity to respond.
I think, the critical issue is where we started. Control crime. One of the things that makes our young people and others want to leave is this overwhelming sense of insecurity that they have. The other issue is to be able to provide access to the basic necessities of life, like housing, like better jobs, higher paying jobs, which is why we are fundamentally committed to building a new economic structure that moves beyond the traditional structures. Agricultural transformation is one area that we have pointed to. The rise of the creative economy, music, fashion, design, drama, leisure industries are another important element in this. Digitizing our country and reducing the digital division that will enable a much more productive economy overall is yet a third area in which we want to be very active in this regard. All told, we will prevent the brain drain when people have an opportunity to fulfill their hopes, dreams, and aspirations right here in the country of their birth.
It's now your opportunity to respond to the same question. Mr. Holmes.
Let's talk about how we get that done. Our manifesto made a solemn and firm commitment that we will reserve 10,000 houses for young people under the age of 35 at 0% interest rates and full mortgage to achieve. This is a very serious commitment to the youth of Jamaica. Housing is a very important investment that people should make at the start of their lives. I also want to say that our young people are looking for jobs of the future. We're qualifying many Jamaicans for the traditional jobs, but we must also seek to provide the new jobs in artificial intelligence, in animation, in knowledge services, and we will do that with the creation of our tech park. We have seen signs of growth in the BPO industry. The BPO industry is still operating at pretty much a primary level, but we intend to partner with all the stakeholders to increase the value of the services that they're doing so that there are diversified opportunities there for our young people, not to have to run overseas, but to come here, stay here and work.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. It's time to take another break in this national leadership debate. Please stay with us.
The general election debates are presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission in association with Proven, Flow, Scotiabank, National Democratic Institute, Digicel, NCB, Hanjam, UWI, JN Group, and Victoria Mutual Group. Watch, listen, decide, vote.
Make your voice count.
Make your voice count.
Make your voice count. Make your voice count.
Make your voice count.
Straight up, man, make your voice get heard. You understand what I mean?
Find out where you are to vote by calling the EOJ or checking the EOJ website. Remember to bring your voter ID card. Current voter ID cards are valid until December 2020. Remember, you may still vote without your ID card, but the process will be longer. Listen to the instructions of the presiding officer. Mark your ballot behind the voting booth and return your ballot to the presiding officer folded. Once the counterfoil is removed, your ballot cannot be traced back to you. Dip your finger in the ink and watch as your ballot is deposited into the ballot box.
Your vote is your voice. Make it count.
COVID-19 is still here. Always wear your mask correctly while in public places, covering your nose and mouth at all times. Masks should never be worn over the head, under your chin, below your nose, or hanging from your ears. Recovery from COVID-19 can take up to 60 days or more. The mask or the ventilator? You choose. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Young people may have different interests from those of older voters, and those interests should be represented. Voting will affect the nature of representation and ultimately the content of public policy. So if you don't vote, you and your distinct interests are more likely to be ignored or neglected by policymakers. Make your voice count. Beneficiaries. The PATH payment cycle begins on August 24, and Paymaster will deliver to beneficiaries who normally collect at the largest post offices. Check the Friday Star to find out where you should collect. If your post office is on the list, you must collect at Paymaster on the date set for your name. You will not need a control number, but you must take a government ID with you. For more information, call PATH at 876-922-8007 or check the ministry's website and Facebook page. PATH, advancing your family, developing Jamaica. A message from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security.
This is our home, Jamaica, and tourism is the lifeblood of our country. Let's all feel good again. Whether with family or friends, we want you to enjoy your staycation.
We have to ensure that they are comfortable, they feel well protected.
New standards are in place to ensure your safety. We are here to serve you better, so you can have the best experience. Come out and rediscover Jamaica.
We are ready.
We are ready.
We are ready.
Rediscover Jamaica.
Heartbeat of the world.
Jamaica, home of the resilient, passionate and hard-working. A people and a nation who have achieved and defied all odds, working to keep their economy growing, their country thriving, from investments made in innovative opportunities and exports demanded globally. We have a vision, now within our grasp, where Jamaica becomes the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. We will not let go of this vision. We will grow. We will overcome these challenging times and look to the future with hope and positivity. These are special times. The world as we know it has changed, but home will always be in our hearts. And in Jamaica, you can always find a home. Think you know Jamaica? Look again. You will be surprised.
Crime is Jamaica's #1 threat. As we stay apart while working together to fight COVID-19, we must all live good and unite against crime and violence in Jamaica. Live good means talk it out, don't fight it out. We must live good to build a safe Jamaica. Stay home, stay safe, live good.
Institute, Digicel, NCB, PanJam, UWI, JN Group, and Victoria Mutual Group. Watch, listen, decide, vote.
Thank you so much for staying with us. You've been watching the final in a series of 3 political debates being facilitated by the Jamaica Debates Commission, which is a partnership of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce and Media Association Jamaica. And for those just tuning in, we still have some time to go. Thank you for joining us. Dion Jackson Miller will start us off in this segment with a question to the leader of the Jamaica Labour Party, Mr. Andrew Holness.
Mr. Holness, at one time or another, you've had experienced businessmen and politicians like Carl Samuda, Mike Henry, Darrell Vaz, Matthew Samuda, Pernell Charles Jr. serving as ministers without portfolio in your ministries. You oversee economic growth and job creation, land, housing, water, works, environment, until recently education in what could arguably be called the Ministry of Everything. Why should Jamaicans trust your team when you clearly don't?
I think Jamaicans would be very satisfied with the results that we have gotten with the consolidation of several ministries. I find some of these questions to be inconsistent because oftentimes reports will be pulled where it is recommended that we should only have, for example, 10 ministries. How would you get that without consolidating? We have moved very closely towards ensuring that the silo-type bureaucracy that exists in our country is eliminated. What we have managed to achieve in structuring the government this way is to give all the key agencies that can drive economic growth, job creation and development and place them under one policy guidance. It has worked. This is why we were able to complete so many roads all at once when the previous administration could not complete them. We completed and we started new projects. That is why we were able to bring cruise ships into Port Royal when previous administrations for decades tried. This is why we were able to complete very quickly and make a decision on the cockpit country when many administrations before tried. The real proof of what we have done is in the results. The results are unassailable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holness. Dr. Peter Phillips, your rebuttal.
I think it is important for us to emphasize that team is the critical part of how we approach things. A team which not only has a mixture of ages and accomplishment, youth and maturity, but also with a proper gender mix. And as I said earlier, we need to ensure that we make it easier for women to participate in the political process. But it is also important that we recognize that Mr. Holness says that he has delivered, but the 5 in 4 has not come about. Crime has increased, and in fact, the digital divide has weakened.
Dr. Phillips.
They have not accomplished this.
George Davis will now pose a question to you again, Dr. Peter Phillips.
Dr. Phillips, in its 2011 manifesto, the PNP said, quote, "The police force is the most important agency in the country's campaign against crime." In that document, the party proposed a comprehensive modernization of the force through a statutory body, the Police Management Authority. That body was not created in the PNP's last term in office. Nothing was said about modernizing the police force in the 2016 manifesto and nothing in this manifesto. Is it, sir, that the police force is fine as is?
No, I think it is made clear in what we have signed up to in the recent consensus document and what we have committed to in our present manifesto, that we need to complete police reforms. In fact, a national review of the force was undertaken, and it needs to be done. We need to strengthen the investigative capacities of the force. We need to strengthen the numbers in the force. We need to enhance its mobility, and at the same time we need to ensure that all the other supportive elements that will make the force more effective need to be put in place, including social intervention programs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phillips. Your rebuttal, Mr. Holness?
You know, there's a time and place for studies. I have put forward many commissions to understand problems and get solutions. But there is also a time for implementation. And what can be said about this government, which has always been said, oh, we need to bring in vehicles and we need to track them. This government has done that. Oh, we need to improve the policy as to how policemen are promoted. This government has done that. Oh, we need to bring in intelligence. We must have intelligence-driven crime fighting. This government has made the investment to do it. This government is reforming the police force before your very eyes. The leader of the opposition talks a good talk, but it is as if they have just discovered what the problems and solutions are.
Mr. Holness. Well, it's now time for the debaters to ask each other a question within 30 seconds, to which they're each obliged to give an answer within 90 seconds. The answer given in this case can be rebutted, but in no longer than 45 seconds. And so, your question to Mr. Holness, Dr. Phillips.
Mr. Holness has said that he has produced 20,000 houses, but the PIOJ's numbers say that in 2019 there were 8,000 housing starts, and the number of housing completions was less than 2,000. How do you explain the discrepancy between the PIOJ's numbers and your own?
Well, first of all, the NHD has provided us with very accurate data, and I speak on the NHD's data. And the NHD's data tells us that we have had, over all 4.5 years, close to 20,000 housing starts. You ask about housing starts? Yes, the houses will be completed, and they are being completed at a rapid rate. People are already buying them. As it relates to the 22,000 housing solutions that we have provided in our 4.5 years, that would include what has been provided by the HAJ, the Housing Agency of Jamaica, an incredible agency which is doing very well in providing housing solution for average income persons and low income persons. So we have done very well in the provision of housing solutions, far better than the previous administration.
Thank you.
Housing,
go ahead, Dr.
Housing solutions are less than 8,000 over the period of the administration. The numbers that you are citing do not compute. It would seem again it is another PR gesture which doesn't face up to the fact that the number of solutions have not been provided for people to be able to live in these houses.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Now, Mr. Holness, your opportunity to ask Dr. Phillips a question.
Dr. Phillips, you have claimed to be a great advocate for fiscal discipline. You have pointed to the sacrifice that the Jamaican people have made to pass IMF tests and achieve fiscal stability. How could you approve, how could you create, how could you disseminate a manifesto that, were it to be implemented, it would unravel and destroy the very thing that you claimed you sacrificed for, this fiscal responsibility and fiscal discipline? Is it that you are so power hungry, so desperate, that you could not resist trying to trick the people of Jamaica?
I think you've got your facts all wrong. The fact of the matter is that the program of the People's Agenda will involve about 1/3 of the discretionary expenditure that is available to any government. It means that we will be spending in the order of about $50 billion. That will be the priority focus in this area. We make no apology for providing relief for the population that is being negatively affected by COVID-19. It will not destroy the fiscal foundations of the country, and it is absolutely incorrect for you to suggest that premise.
Mr. Holness.
Dr. Phillips, in Parliament, when the Minister of Finance came to announce that because of the maintenance of good fiscal discipline, we were able to put forward a CARE program, very thing you are talking about, and have implemented 440,000 Jamaicans got a CARE grant. You objected to that because you took the view that it would result in a compromise of the fiscal rules. How could you come here now and put forward a manifesto in 2020 that would destroy what we have worked for the last decade? It is unreasonable, and I am personally hurt because you have destroyed your credibility.
Thank you.
There is absolutely nothing that occurred in the Parliament where the PNP or myself repudiated that.
Dr. Phillips, that's it.
Okay.
It's time for us to have the closing statements. And based on the earlier coin toss, Dr. Peter Phillips of the People's National Party will go first.
58 years after independence, Jamaica can do better. In fact, if you look at what has occurred over the past 4.5 years, we have not been equal to the task of meeting the challenges of the 21st century. Our crime numbers, our murder numbers in particular, are up. We have failed to achieve 5 in 4. Economic growth stagnates. We have a deepened digital divide. We believe that the opportunity exists now for us to be able to make a marked improvement in the access to services that are available to the Jamaican people, to provide better housing, to provide for a new economy, to provide for a safe and secure environment for all our people to live in. In order to do this, we need to mobilize all the resources and energies of our people. That is the approach of the People's National Party. And so, building this future, building this new Jamaica of your dreams and hopes and aspirations is within our grasp. And therefore, I urge you all, on September 3rd, vote for the People's National Party. Put your X beside the head.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Mr. Holness, your closing statement.
Thank you, Dervan. This election is about giving the people of Jamaica the assurance that we will come through this pandemic safe with our lives and livelihood intact. This election is about leadership. This election is about strength and stamina. This election is about who is best able to unify the country. This election is about a vision for a better and more prosperous future. This election comes down to who has gotten things done and who will be able to get things done. The people of Jamaica, for the first time, in a long time has a government that can campaign on achievements. You have a government that can campaign on performance, and a government that offers a very credible manifesto. On Election Day, September 3rd, I urge you to consider your options carefully. Careful consideration will reveal that the credible and right choice is the Jamaica Labour Party. I thank you, and I look forward to your support. God bless Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Holness. And that concludes the debate between the President of the People's National Party, Dr. Peter Phillips, and the leader of the Jamaica Labour Party, Mr. Andrew Holness. Given the increase in the number of cases of COVID-19, the Jamaica Debates Commission invites each party leader to send a message to their supporters and to Jamaica about the importance of observing the COVID-19 protocols. We invite Dr. Peter Phillips of the PNP to go first in 45 seconds.
I want to urge all Jamaicans and the supporters and members of the People's National Party to consider their safety. Wear your mask, sanitize, maintain social distance, be safe so that you can protect yourself and your families and come out on election day. Jamaica needs all its people to be able to build on this future which we all seek when these elections are over. Remember, stay safe and protect yourself, maintain social distancing, and sanitize.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. We invite Andrew Holness of the JLP to go ahead and deliver his message.
We encourage all Jamaicans to come out and vote. But first, we encourage you to be conscientious that we are in a pandemic. So when you come to the polling station, develop the situational awareness that you need to social distance. Now is the time, more than ever, when we need to stand in line 6 feet apart. Develop the awareness as well that there will be persons coming into the line, elderly persons, persons who may be ill, that should be given priority to vote. Allow them to vote. When you come to the polling station, please wear your mask. Travel with hand sanitizer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holness. We now invite both party leaders to elbow bump in the spirit of friendship after having donned their masks. All a part of the new normal. And that's it, the final debate in the 2020 general election debate series that focused on leadership and featured Dr. Peter Phillips of the PNP and Andrew Holness of the JLP. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to our production crew, production and funding partners, and most of all, our viewers and listeners across Jamaica and the diaspora. On behalf of the Jamaica Debates Commission, we're asking you to observe all health and safety guidelines from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, not just on election day, but every day. We can beat COVID-19, but it starts with and depends on you. I'm Dervan Malcolm. Good evening.
The corrupt are getting away too often. Help catch